Welcome to Teaching Orchestra. If your orchestra is performing Midnight Rain, it's a good opportunity to teach them string crossing and improve their string crossing technique, because there's a lot of opportunities here. And if you've looked at the score more than 2 seconds, the last 4 measures of the first page are likely to pop out. And you've got a lot of string crossings here in the cellos. And you've probably looked at those 4 measures and thought to yourself, do I have the cellos to really play this? Or maybe, do I have time to teach my cellos given their current technical state? If you're watching this video, you've probably answered in the affirmative, but maybe you're watching this because you've shelved this piece for now, but you hope to teach it later. So if you teach it now, or you teach it later, or you don't teach it at all, you're likely to run into a similar figure in the cello section if you program any piece of music at this level that has quarter note equals 80 beats per minute. You're going to run across similar writing. And why is that? Is it a coincidence? Are they just copying each other? Not really. And maybe like 2 seconds into this, you're just going to call me a nerd and click out of this. But I think it's important to have an understanding of the physics because it helps you teach this better. We need the understanding of how sound works in the natural world. We have pitch, which is frequency, and we have volume, which is amplitude, and we need to understand that they're not linear. In Western music, we notate them in a linear way. We look at a scale, and each note moves up one line or one space at a time, but the frequencies don't progress that way. Like if you go to A to B, you just add 40 hertz, and then B to C sharp, that's another 40 hertz, right? And all major seconds are just 40 hertz, and that's not the case. It's not linear, it's logarithmic. And the same with dynamics. You look at the change in the decibels. It's not a linear measurement of volume either. It's on a log base 10 scale. So going from 10 to 20 decibels is an amplitude ratio of 10, but from 20 to 30 is an amplitude ratio of 31.62. And when you combine the two, you end up with a different set of problems because the higher frequencies, the higher notes are going to carry more energy than the lower notes, sort of how we get sunburns from ultraviolet light because it's carrying a higher amount of energy, higher amount of frequencies, right? Okay, you got it? All right, enough physics for now. Let's try to take what we've just learned and apply it to Midnight Rain. What does that have to do with Midnight Rain, and why is it going to be challenging to play this piece? So first of all, when your low strings are playing on their lower strings, they're going to need more energy because they're playing lower notes, and those lower frequencies aren't going to carry the same amount of energy. And we've tried to help them out. We've given them thicker strings. We've given them some bigger instruments so that they can resonate, but they're still going to have to use a lot of bow pressure on the lower string, particularly on the C string when they play this F if they're playing it in first position. So then why are we seeing all these string crossings? Why do we see this very common line that we see in a lot of composers that play pieces that are at quarter note equals 80? Because like I said earlier, lower frequencies have slighter differences than the higher frequency. And that's why that when you play chords in the lower registers that are in a close structure, it sounds muddy. All right, let me just go back to this piano here, and my cameras aren't set up too well for it, but maybe you can kind of see, just to kind of illustrate what I'm talking about. It's the easiest way for me to do this right now. All right, so in Midnight Rain, if we play like these 3 chords, right, like A minor, and then G major, F minor, it kind of sounds muddy, right, in the lower part of the piano. It's going to sound muddy. If we break up this texture and we put it in open, in an open structure rather than closed structure, we end up with something that resembles the harmonic series. We could have an octave here, a fifth, fourth, and then we'll use a minor third because, it's in a minor key. So we have A minor, that's right. Once you hear that, you can't unhear it. So sorry about that. Now every time you're going to listen to this, you're going to hear that song. My bad. But anyway, that sounds a lot less muddy than what we had here before with these chords, right? So the cello line is broken up that way. These are just broken chords that mimic the harmonic series, right? So we got like more like the 5th here. So you see how it works? Okay, so now we understand why we have this pattern here at 17, and we understand why it's functioning this way. And now we can apply our knowledge here to help our students. When I have my students practice string crossings, I just have them set the bow on the string and not really play any notes, but I just have them rock the bow across the strings and see if they can bend all 4 strings by putting weight down. And if they're at the frog, it's really going to help because they're going to have an easier time. They're going to have more leverage. And also, they don't have to rotate the shoulder as much when they're at the frog as when they're at the tip. They got to move quite a bit more. So it's going to help them out to be at the frog. It's also going to help them out when they're bending the strings to be a little closer to the fingerboard just for that exercise. Now, in context, when you're playing, you don't want to be close to the fingerboard because that's going to make it harder to cross strings. If you bend the strings too much, you're going to collide with another string and you're going to have accidental double stops. You're not going to have as much control. So just to practice, you have them bend the strings, but in real life, in context, don't have them do that. Have them play closer to the bridge. Another thing is when you're playing closer to the bridge, it's going to change the waveform, right? And so it's going to produce more overtones, right? Which are like resonances in the harmonic series. And that's really going to help everybody tune in the orchestra. And it's really important. So don't have them play it above the fingerboard. But anyway, the upper strings might need some reinforcement when it comes to playing close to the frog, especially if they've got bad bow hands or if they're really stiff. You might need to remind them to stay close to the frog when they're crossing strings for these exercises. You know, I don't think your cello section is going to have quite the same amount of problems because they tend to play closer to the frog anyway. But you might need to remind them about the bowing lane, and you might need to remind them to play closer to the bridge once you get them to start bowing. So let's look at the teaching companion, and the teaching companion is available on teachingorchestra.com. So at first we just have them rock across the strings up and down, and then we get them just to play quarter notes and make sure they're comfortable with the quarter notes, 2 bows per note. And then once they're good at that, then we just have them use 1 bow per note and see if they can handle that. Then we challenge them a little bit more and we get them to play some slurs up and down. Then 8th notes up and down, 8th notes with slurs, 8th notes bow 2, slur 2 like we have in context. In measure 18, we're going to go up to the A and then jump down to the D. Another thing that they could do is play this part of it, this arpeggio in 2nd position, right? They could use 2, 2, 1, 4, using an extended augmented fingering or 3/4 finger patterns, if that's what you teach. And that might help them. Then they only have to cross 1 string because this is 4th finger on the D string, and then open G here, open D, and they should be able to get back to 1st position for that G with these 2 open strings in preceding it. If your students are really good at 2nd position, that's great. And they're going to need some 2nd position anyway because there's 1 note here at 37 where they're going to have to find an E somehow, and give them that exposure is really going to help them. So that's one way to do it. Otherwise, you're just going to have to teach them. Now, it's easy to set up because you've got a bunch of Ds beforehand. So you're going to play 4th finger, and then you're going to pick one of these Ds, either this one or that one, to play 2nd finger so that you could go 1st finger C, D, 4th finger for the E, and then, you need to come back down here. You could play that 1st finger. Otherwise, you could do 2, 1. You could do your shift here. The best way to do it is probably not 1, 1 because it's slurred and that's going to sound sloppy. So you probably want to do 4, 2, 1. And that's just going to take a little bit of practice and slow and woodshedding it. But because it has that 1 note in 2nd position, it gets bumped up from a 2 to the 3 on the Texas PML. And is it like in Hollywood where they drop a completely unnecessary swear to bump it up from a G rating to PG so that they can get a larger audience, so that their older audience is going to take it more seriously? I don't know, but it is what it is. But going back to this pattern here at 17, we get it again here at 44. through 47. So we better get good at it because we play it a couple of times. So we teeter-totter from string to string, then we add some bow, 2 quarter notes first, then 1 quarter note, and that way we get more comfortable, then we can add some slurs, we can bump it up to 8th notes, and it's going to sound nice. Make sure that we're good at the preceding technique before we graduate to the next one. If we play the quarter notes really sloppy and then we just play the 8th notes because, well, they're there, it's not going to really do your students much good. And you got to understand that students aren't going to master string crossing in just one lesson. You know, it might take a week, it might take 2 weeks before you can go from the quarter notes to the 8th notes. It might take a week before you could go from 2 quarter notes to 1 quarter note. So take it nice and easy, but make sure they've got the technique, make sure they're in the right part of the bow, make sure that they're using their shoulders, work on the teeter-totter, work on the weight, particularly on the lower strings. Make sure that we sound even throughout the range. Then once we get really good, then we can graduate to the more challenging techniques. We can add the slurs, we can speed it up, we can do what we need to do. So this pattern right here is even more challenging than we've got in Midnight Rain because we cross 3 strings, and if they can play this accurately, they're going to be able to have the technique for sure to handle the string crossings, and all we got to do is add the left hand. And that's going to be the focus of my next video. I'm going to talk about the left hand and some left hand strategies, so I hope to see you then.